Hi, I'm Krista Brady, and today I'll be teaching you about the muscles that move the lower extremity. Let's start off with the muscles that move the femur. Up here we see a muscle that's coming down from the lumbar region, and it's coming down and it's going to pass the inguinal ligament. This muscle up here is called psoas major, and then below the inguinal ligament, it will combine with another muscle. That other muscle is right here, taking its origin from the iliac part of the os coxa, and this is called iliacus. So beyond the inguinal ligament, these two muscles combine into one muscle called iliopsoas. So they all do the same thing. Psoas major, iliacus, and iliopsoas all flex the thigh. So that's going to raise the thigh anteriorly. Now we have switched to a different model so that we can see a very important landmark clearly. Now there are two muscles here on the front of the thigh, sartorius, which is this long, thin muscle that comes all the way across the front of the thigh, and adductor longus right here. These two muscles make a V, and then the inguinal ligament up here makes a triangle with them. This area is known as the femoral triangle, and that's a very important clinical landmark because it includes the femoral nerve, the femoral artery, and the femoral vein, which are very important and large nerves and blood vessels. Within that femoral triangle, you'll also find two muscles. One of those we've already talked about right here. This is iliopsoas. This one on the other side is called pectineus. Pectineus is a muscle that is going to adduct the thigh. It pulls the thigh closer to the midline. Now, what about these ones that I've already mentioned? Sartorius and adductor longus. Sartorius is a long, thin muscle, so it does several things very weakly. It weakly flexes the thigh, weakly abducts the thigh, and weakly laterally rotates the thigh. And those happen to be all of the things that you need to do to sit cross-legged like a tailor. And the word sartorius comes from the old word for tailor. So it can do all those things. Adductor longus right here does what its name implies. It adducts the thigh. So all of the adductors that bring the thigh closer to the midline are going to be in a line. We already talked about pectineus and adductor longus. Now moving along, there's a long, graceful muscle that's right here along where the seam of your pants would be, the inseam of your pants, and that is gracilis, this long, graceful muscle. And then one more, adductor magnus, which is quite a large muscle, but it's covered up by some of these other muscles, so you can't see quite how large it is. Those four muscles all adduct the thigh. They bring it closer to the midline. So if those muscles that were on the medial side of the thigh adduct the thigh, where do you think the muscles that abduct the thigh, that take it away from the midline, would have to be located? They'd have to be located more on the lateral side of the thigh, right? So here we're looking, this is the posterior side of the thigh, and this is the lateral side of the thigh. And there's a great landmark here that will help you tell that this is the lateral side of the thigh. That is this iliotibial band. This is a band of connective tissue that goes all the way along the lateral side of the thigh. And so you just have to identify that. There's no action for it because it's connective tissue. But there's a muscle right here that connects to, that inserts on that iliotibial band. And this muscle is called tensor fasciae latae. Tensor fasciae latae is going to abduct the thigh, and it also helps to flex the thigh. And then there's this big, huge muscle on the posterior side of the thigh that you've probably heard the name of before. This is gluteus maximus. Gluteus maximus is a huge muscle, and so, like a lot of huge muscles, it has multiple actions. It is the main muscle that is going to extend and hyperextend the thigh, and it will also help laterally rotate and abduct the thigh as well. Now, since we're on the posterior side of the thigh, moving down a little bit, we can see the hamstring muscles, which are a group of muscles on the posterior side of the thigh. And these are going to help move the thigh. They will also help move the lower leg, which we'll talk about later. So first of all, the most lateral of these is biceps femoris. Biceps femoris does have two origins, like its name implies, and it's over the femoral region here. And it is going to help extend and hyperextend the thigh. And then these other two right here, there is one superficial muscle and there's one that's deep to it, right underneath it. The one on top with a T is semitendinosus, and it has a nice long tendon. Underneath it, flat like a membrane, is semimembranosus. And these two are both going to do the same action. They are going to help extend the thigh. And we'll also talk later about what they do with the lower leg. So those are the muscles that move the femur. So we have switched to a different model now so that I can teach you the muscles that move the lower leg. But I'm going to go back and talk about those hamstring muscles that I just taught you again, because while I told you that they weakly extend and hyperextend the thigh, which they do, their main job is actually going to be to flex the lower leg. So again, this is biceps femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus, and their main job is to flex the lower leg. So if they flex the lower leg and they're on the posterior side of the thigh, what side do you think the muscles that extend the lower leg would have to be on? Those would have to be on the anterior of the thigh. So you've probably heard of your quadriceps group of muscles. That is this large group on the anterior side of the thigh. So you do have to know the names of the four muscles that make up that group. This long straight one, right on the front, is rectus femoris. Rectus femoris and all the other quadriceps muscles are going to insert on the quadriceps tendon, which attaches to the patella and then continues on as the patellar ligament to attach to the tibial tuberosity. So you should be able to identify the quadriceps tendon and the patellar ligament. And since those are connective tissue, they do not have actions. The action of rectus femoris, however, this muscle, and the other muscles of the quadriceps group is going to be to extend the lower leg. So this is rectus femoris. To the medial side is vastus medialis. Vastus medialis, this is another one of that quadriceps group. And then on the lateral side is vastus lateralis. Vastus lateralis, and so those both will help to extend the lower leg. And deep to rectus femoris is a muscle called vastus intermedius. And this is the fourth one of that group, of that quadriceps group of muscles. So its action will also be to extend the lower leg. Now, moving a little farther down the leg, moving to the actual lower leg, there are a couple more muscles here that are going to help move the lower leg and the foot. On the posterior side of the lower leg, we have this large muscle back here. This large muscle is gastric medius, and it has two actions. It does weakly help to flex the lower leg, but its main action is plantar flexion of the foot. So plantar flexion, remember that's when you stand on your tiptoes. That's what gastric medius does. And it does that with the help of this muscle right underneath it, flat like a fillet of sole. This is soleus. And soleus will also help plantar flex the foot. Gastric medius and soleus together insert via this calcaneal tendon onto the calcaneus. And that calcaneal tendon, that is what is commonly referred to as the Achilles tendon, after the Greek hero Achilles, who was killed by an arrow sticking into his ankle right there. But you should know it by its proper name, which is the calcaneal tendon. One other muscle that moves the foot that you should know is on the anterior side of the lower leg, and it's right here. It is called tibialis anterior. And that name you should be able to remember because this is on the anterior side of the tibia, hence the name tibialis anterior. Tibialis anterior is going to dorsiflex the foot. So it's going to pull those toes up towards the front of your tibia. And those are all the muscles that move the lower leg. Today, I've taught you about the muscles that move the thigh, the muscles that move the lower leg, and the muscles that move the foot. Now go ahead and practice these using the labeled and unlabeled images provided, and then you can apply these on the lab exercises.